Are you struggling to come up with original content week in and week out? Start a podcast. Interview your ideal clients, let them talk about what they care about most, and never run out of content ideas again. Learn more at sweetfishmedia.com.
You're listening to the B2B Growth Show, a podcast dedicated to helping B2B executives achieve explosive growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. I'm James Carberry.
And I'm Jonathan Green.
Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the B2B Growth Show. Today we are joined by Jeremy Carlin. Jeremy is the Vice President of Business Development at Jetpack. Jeremy, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Jeremy, it's a pleasure to have you on the show. Jeremy and I just talked for like half an hour before we started recording. It was an amazing conversation. We were just sort of catching back up on all the stuff that's been going on. I'm doing a new Halloween Horror Nights thing here in Orlando. Jeremy was telling me about how he recently got engaged and is, now in sort of wedding planning mode. So that's fantastic. Jeremy, we are officially going to be talking today, though, about digital ad creative in a programmatic world. And I'm thrilled to have you unpack that for our listeners. But before we do, maybe you can tell us a little about what you and the Jetpack team are up to these days.
Certainly. So Jetpack Digital has been around for over 8 years at this point, started by three men who come from the publisher world, and started a publisher that at the time was called Buzz Media that eventually became Spin Media. And then Spin Media, I think, was sunsetted this year, actually. So it was around for a while, but the founders had been kind of done with that for a while. So basically when they left their kind of publishing background, they kind of started Jetpack as a response to all the gaps that they had seen in the marketplace, specifically as it relates to ad creative. So ad creative kind of became our signal call. We do it via a few different service models, including managed service. That has been our bread and butter for the entire length of time that we've been around. That's having our clients send us any sort of assets, photos, images, and then we kind of jumble that all together and put out a specific format or a way for the actual ad creative to be viewed in a fun or different way. And we do that. We have not only do we do that via managed service where we're doing the kind of product building, and then we also have a self-service portal where we have our clients go in and build it themselves. Tends to be a little bit more cost efficient. We're actually putting out our self-service tool into the market within the next week. So we're super excited about that big product launch coming. And we definitely have some really cool things to come. We have been around for a while, but I think we're starting to make a splash these days because there just aren't that many people who do what we do anymore, which is focus on the publishing environment, content creators, aggregators, and provide those folks with genuine and innovative creative across multiple digital screens.
Well, that's fantastic. We're looking forward to seeing what you guys are cooking up in the very near future. And today we are going to be, like I said, we're going to be talking about digital ad creative in a programmatic world. That feels like a very dense sentence, Jeremy. Help me unpack that a little bit for our listeners.
Certainly. So programmatic, for any folks that deal in the advertising world, specifically digital, but starting to be other elements as well, anyone who deals in the media environment has heard of the term programmatic. For folks that have not, basically it's an automation of the way ads are bought and sold through digital channels. And basically it has created, it comes first, in order to scale something, you need to have a standard for it, right? There's a standard way in which everyone either does whatever you're doing, and that way, since everyone's doing it the same way, then you can grow it and more people can do it the same way, blah, 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 right? So by creating basically standard ad sizes years and years ago, most of the time, I think the first standard ad sizes were put together by a few different companies, Google being one of them. And basically, they created these different standard ad sizes. And by doing so over the years and automating those different standard ad sizes, it's brought an exchange-like environment to digital media. And that has had a whole range of different consequences, including on, what we're going to talk about today, which is ad creative.
Okay. And you sort of this first question I wanted to ask, I mean, it almost feels like you're already getting into it, is, what is standard media? How does that fit into the media landscape, especially when we are talking about programmatic automated buying?
Certainly, and a good question. So the first thing I'll say is that programmatic has basically shifted the way that folks really buy, purchase, think about whatever it has to do with ads. Now, that is very specific to ad creative because, as I mentioned, there's these different standard sizes. For desktop, it's usually pixels, so it's 160 by 600, 300 by 250, and 728 by 90. Again, if you're in digital media, this is old hat to you. Mobile, 320 by 50. So we've scaled at this point. All the major publishers online, right, sell out via direct means much lower than it used to be. But let's just say 30%. So let's say you're a publisher and you sell out 30% of your inventory. What are you going to do with that other 70%, which is mostly made up of the sizes that I just spoke about? You're going to send it out to other people or give it to different exchanges and different auction buying sites so that other people can buy and service your inventory and pay you to get on your site, because that's what it is, right? Impressions, eyeballs, that's what our whole business is about. So because programmatic is, technology focused and, it's supposed to be about automated buying, it was really supposed to bring all this efficiency for time and money. And, since all this stuff has been, you don't have to email another AE to find out about the inventory details and see what kind of budget requirements they have and all these different things that go into, doing an RFP and getting a response and actually doing business. Programmatic was supposed to cut all that stuff out, so it was supposed to be much cheaper, and you're supposed to be able to do more with less people, and all that jazz. And unfortunately, it really hasn't gone that way. In fact, prices in programmatic platforms tend to be anywhere from 10 to 20% higher than direct sold inventory. It's actually cheaper to go through direct sold and not go through these automated channels. For what we're talking about today, creative-wise, programmatic has really strangled what we can do on a day-to-day basis for most creative endeavors. I saw a figure this week that said 50% of display inventory in Europe is programmatic at this point. So that means that 50% of the inventory is spread out between these four sizes that I mentioned earlier. So that's kind of strangled on how digital content and ad creative have kind of meshed. It's hard to do more high impact, funner, higher end, innovative creative if everything's one standard size. And that basically has caused the strangulation of any sort of creativity in the marketplace. And unfortunately, that's a problem. That's not something that's good for publishers. That's not good for advertisers, and it's certainly not good for users. So,
yeah. So, all right, then, Jeremy, let me follow up that question with another one. Then, how would you say that folks should differentiate their non-programmatic and their programmatic inventory?
I mean, I think there's just ways in which they're different in general. I mean, obviously, the easiest way to determine which is did you go on a platform and purchase the inventory? And if you didn't, then you're not doing it programmatically. If you made a call or sent an email to an AE and talked to them that way, odds are it's direct. Now, the programmatic channel has that as well. It's not completely devoid of, having to make all those phone calls.
Right. The human element, you can't get rid of it entirely. Yeah.
And you definitely cannot. In general, I think there's a few ways in which programmatic and non-programmatic kind of play one another. I would say the first one, which has been had a profound impact, is that most advertisers are searching for audiences, whereas earlier they had been searching for different websites specifically. So I think in the RFPs of the past, which in my old days when I was a media buyer all those years ago, basically, I'd have different buckets and I'd say, okay, I have this lifestyle product, or something. I want to be playing my ad units on a lifestyle site. So I would reach out to as many different lifestyle sites as I thought I needed to and see what they could give me and all that good stuff. That nowadays have changed. I think, advertisers have gotten a little more savvy. They have, more interested marketing folks that create actual targeted, they create targeted profiles for their client base that they're looking to get via their products. And really, it doesn't worry. People don't worry so much about what specific website you're on, as long as you can get to whatever audience you're actually looking for, which I think is a pretty different way of thinking about it.
Yeah, you can get so hyper specific with the profiles that you build out and so incredibly targeted. I see what you're talking about.
Yeah, and there's so many layers of data that you can put onto anything to target everything, and I think that kind of plays into creative, which I'll talk about a little bit later. But, first one's kind of audience versus website. Second is really like guaranteed inventory versus non-guaranteed. If you're doing programmatic inventory, if you're buying your impressions via the programmatic channel, then it's never guaranteed that you're going to have the same ad units available that you did before. If you're buying a specific audience and you're doing it across a multitude of sites, maybe one of those sites is where you really need to be, but it's hard to see that because you're running across all these different websites, and that might not be there the next time you want to run a very similar campaign, because who knows if those impressions are going to be available. Whereas if you're going direct and you are talking directly to a publisher, CNN, say, hey, CNN, I have, 2 million impressions this month, and I'm going to have 2 million impressions next month. CNN says, okay, of course, yeah, we'll reserve those 2 million impressions of inventory in each quarter. No big deal.
Yeah.
And I think that is a way retaining business tends to do with ROI. And a great way to have consistent ROI is to have consistency in where you're running your ad units. And I think when you talk about having an audience and just talking about the programmatic channel, you lose that a little bit. So that's another difference. A fixed CPM versus an eCPM. An eCPM, in general, it's a effective CPM, which is basically the average of all the different CPMs that you're purchasing at, versus, it's a little bit simpler when you go straight to a publisher and say, hey, I'm interested in purchasing inventory at a $10 CPM. And they say, okay, $10 it is. So it's just the little nuances that I think kind of differentiate between non-programmatic and programmatic. And those tend to have an influence in general on creative.
Well, and it's interesting, I think, anytime you're talking about creative but also consistency. And it's very difficult to, I think, blend those two things together. When you think creative, you think, okay, inspiration and, who knows exactly when this is going to be done or ready or how successful, but you also need that level of consistency because it's still a business.
Yeah, no, and I think, you bring up a very good point. I don't think a lot of people talk about creative, and consistency in the same sentence, because it's usually, I honestly, I don't hear the word consistency much in my business, period. It's usually like, what's the shiny new object, or what's this or that, I don't hear the word, hey, I would love to have consistent performance or, consistent elements in my creative that match. I just don't think a lot of companies / advertisers in general have those thoughts, because things move so quick that it's hard to maybe take a step back and look at the macro elements when you're kind of tied in the day-to-day a lot. So that's an interesting point you bring up, honestly.
Yeah. Well, and so I think that leads us into this next question, is that, what is the main theme that you see playing out in the ad creative portfolio space right now?
We've talked a decent amount about, what is programmatic and, how that possibly relates a little bit to creative. But I think programmatic, as I've said before, kind of caused the strangulation of different inventory. But I think there's been another unintended consequence, and that's basically what we are talking about, which is the main theme, which is how display, video, and native are all slowly but surely merging. Even for the company that I work for specifically, Jetpack, we were mainly interested, even 2 years ago, we were mainly interested in desktop specific display creative. And I think little by little, the opportunity for direct sold business, which is where we do a lot of our work, has slowly gone away because of programmatic elements. So we've had to differentiate. We've had to, kind of figure out ways to innovate. And I think one of the main ways we're doing that, other than coming up with as many innovative, creative formats as we can and, working with our clients to do so, but we're trying to find interesting ways to include video. We're trying to find interesting ways to include social and find new ways to include mobile for video and native mobile. Trying to find ways to take our technology and utilize other elements of what we do in order to create new revenue streams, because honestly, we need to do that. Advertisers and brands, especially for creatively speaking, advertisers and brands love that shiny new object. Now, they're usually interested in what the actual content of the ad is, and they're usually the ones providing that. But as to how any sort of bells and whistles or anything that's fun or interesting added to it, it tends to come a lot of times from, third-party elements such as myself. So, trying to find new ways to innovate and come up with new revenue streams and still able to match that kind of, shiny object mindset that a lot of advertisers have, specifically, especially when it comes to creative. It kind of necessitates us merging all these things and playing around in each one of those fields. It's tough sledding at times. And if you're not innovative and if you're not trying to push in different areas and, come with different native elements, which are elements that look like whatever, it's an ad unit that looks like the page around it or the content around it, or coming up with different ways to utilize video, such as outstream formats or formats that are literally inside the content, and coming up with new ways to give publishers revenue streams. We have to be doing that. We have to be servicing our clients. And, that's kind of one of the things that programmatic has forced out of a lot of the companies that share a similar position to mine.
Okay. Well, so Jeremy, we've delved into sort of standard versus non-standard digital ad creative, programmatic versus non-programmatic. We've talked about marrying display, native video, other elements. So taking this all together, why does any of this matter? What is the lesson that we're leaving our listeners with today?
I think that it's so funny because when you think about just the marrying, or talking about display inventory or ad creative, it seems like such a tiny little thing, right? It seems like who cares? Like, what does it matter? But, it's really interesting because in my opinion, and I think if you'll talk to most regular people who utilize any sort of digital screen, whether it's mobile, tablet, desktop, OTT, over-the-top boxes like Roku or Xbox or anything like that, the ad element in any of those platforms affects the user greatly. Not only are they looking at the ad unit as actual creative, as actual content, as something that they're consuming, but if you have bad ad content or a bad ad experience on your website or whatever digital platform you're looking at, it affects the user greatly. If you have bad ad creative that breaks your site and the user can't consume the content, that's a big deal. If you have ad creative that's super interruptive and your editorial doesn't really match with that, and it's something where the users have to concentrate on whatever they're reading, and you have a super interruptive ad unit, that's not good. If you have the most boring ad creative, which at this point I can tell you a lot of the potential clients that I see really do, if you have boring ad creative, you're almost missing an element to your site, because if you had interesting ad creative, not only could you be making money, but the users would appreciate it too, because again, they view it as another sort of content that they have to actually consume. And, whether it's display ad creative, whether it's finding different and interesting ways to utilize video, the output of all these different media endeavors of so many people, the people that we're talking about, utilizing all the different data, day parting, negotiating all the different prices, getting all the ad creative set up. The end out point of all of that is an ad creative being shown to the user, which is hopefully the right user, at the end point of all that work. So if it's not up to par, then the user, all that work is definitely going to be for nothing. So, I find it to be a really interesting topic, and one that, honestly, I think people don't think a lot about. I think people put not that much investment in. The main publishers, the big boys, the tier 1A guys, talking about major cable companies, Viacom, Turner, NBC, the major broadcasters, CBS, those guys are just now starting to figure out that they need to put some, more effort and investment and more kind of just effort behind ad creative. They're creating internal teams, talking to different vendors. But the future relationship of us as the media industry with the user base of whatever country you're trying to, run media in, the future of our relationship depends on us finding innovative and fun ways to show our ads to the users, because, as I'm sure a lot of people in media read, paywalls are coming up, viewability becomes more important, ad fraud blocking, and just ad blocking in general, like publishers having their ads blocked. These are all things that are effects of having the same crap creative for many, many years. People got sick and tired of viewing the same crap, so they started to innovate on how to not have to view it and consume that content. And here we sit. So I think it's really important. Obviously I'm a little biased, but as you can see, there's usually a lot to talk about when it comes to ad creative. So.
Absolutely. Well, and Jeremy, no one can certainly doubt your passion and expertise for what we're talking about today. And if any of our listeners are interested in following up, they want to know more about digital ad creative in a programmatic world, they want to know more about Jetpack, they want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to go about doing that?
By email is probably the best way. My email address is jeremy@jetpack.net. Super simple. We had jetpack.com for many years, but people started calling and asking us about how to get actual jetpacks, so we went jetpack.net. But yeah, no, we certainly are ready, willing, and able to help anybody with any of their ad creative issues or questions or problems. And we're certainly here to help.
That's fantastic. Jeremy, thank you again so much for your time. It was a real pleasure having you on the show today.
You as well, man. Thanks so much for having me again. Hopefully this time wasn't was a little bit more coherent than last time. This
time was perfect. And again, I'd also like to say again, congratulations on your impending nuptials. That's fantastic. Also,
I appreciate that, man. Thanks so much, and I'm glad things in Florida are a little bit better than they were last week.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, have a good one, John.
You too.
If you're a B2B marketer, we want to feature you on sites like the Huffington Post, Social Media Examiner, and Chief Marketer. Every week, we send out a question related to B2B marketing. We use the responses to those questions to fuel the content we write for really popular websites. So head over to sweetfishmedia.com/questions and sign up today.
Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.